Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Alan. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic.
Thanks for being here. Alan, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 35 years old. I am married. I have 3 kids, all 3 boys. We live in North Carolina, in between Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and Raleigh, North Carolina. I am a fabrication engineer, an electrical engineer, and a sheet metal fabricator. I'm also a martial artist. I've been doing martial arts for about 28 years, and that pretty much sums it up.
Well, it sounds like you're a really well-rounded guy. I'm impressed.
Thanks, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. How would you describe your interest in cryptids before you had your first encounter?
I've always been interested in werewolves and vampires and zombies, but I just never really thought that they were real.
You never thought they were real until you had that first experience. After that, you knew the truth then.
Yes, sir. I sure did.
Yeah, I found out the hard way. Your mom used to be a Wicca. Please tell us what a Wicca is and how that ties into what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, Wicca is a type of witch. I know it's like what everybody puts as a little green lady with a tall black hat with a dress with a cauldron stirring some potion, but that's not what it is. It's actually a nature person, and what they do is they have like prayers and things of that nature that they do on like moonlit nights with like rituals and stuff like that. I really don't know too much more about it. I just know that my mom, she studied Wicca before I was born and a few years after I was born, and that's pretty much all I know about it.
Because of her interest in witchcraft, did she ever tell you anything about werewolves? And if she did you believe any of the things that she told you?
Yeah, she told me that she's seen a few werewolves before, but I just thought she was just crazy and really didn't know what she was talking about.
What did she tell you about the werewolves that she saw?
Well, she would always say that when she was doing spells and stuff like that in the woods and whatnot, that you could hear the werewolves walking around in the background, and they would sometimes come and show themselves, from the wood line and stand there and watch.
Well, that's awfully creepy.
Yes, sir, it is. And that's why I didn't really think that she was telling the truth about things, because, the movies, see a werewolf, it's going to attack you. It's just not going to sit back against the tree line and just watch you.
Yeah, that's what you would think at least. You told me in the pre-interview that you've seen strange creatures in your area and heard strange things since you moved there. Please tell us more about that.
Well, the first 2 years that we moved out to the property that we're at, we always hear howlings. And the howlings were like coyotes, but you could hear the coyotes in the back, but you couldn't ever pinpoint where they were, and they were all around you. And it seems like they were always all around you, 360 degrees all the way around. Sometimes you would hear these screechings, women screaming, and sometimes you would hear baby crying, but that's the strange noises that we've heard around our property.
People in your area have claimed that they've seen Black Panthers. Have you seen any?
No, sir, I have never seen any of the Black Panthers that are in the wild, but I have seen a Black Panther in captivity.
If you do have dogmen around, the last thing you need is to worry about Black Panthers being around there too. That wouldn't be a good situation.
No, sir, it wouldn't. You don't want 2 predatory animals like that living in the same area.
Yeah, that'd be too much. Do you think any of the strange creatures you've seen might have been Black Panthers?
No, sir. The creatures that I've seen were actually too big for it to be a Black Panther.
Yeah, sounds like they were. We'll get into that in just a bit here, and I think the listeners will agree. Did you ever think about moving after these strange things started to happen?
No, sir. I told my wife when we moved to the property that we moved at that we would move closer to her job. So that's what we did, because I've always been the one that moved closer to my job, and she'd have to always commute. So I told her that this time when we buy a house that we would stay there and we would just hang out for the long haul.
It takes a lot of guts to stay in a place where you have such strange things going on. I commend you on that.
Yes, sir. I've had strange things happen to me all my life, so I guess I'm kind of used to it.
I'd say so. Speaking of strange things, what was the first strange thing that happened on or around your property?
Well, one night, it was probably about 11 o'clock at night, I let my 2 pit bulls out to use the bathroom, and we don't have a fence because we live out in the country. When I mean out in the country, I mean out in the country. We live in the sticks. Our nearest neighbor is about a quarter mile to a half mile from us in both directions. So we can't even holler and hear each other across the way. So I let the dogs out. Like I said, we don't have a fence. So I let the dogs out, and we didn't have floodlights or anything at the moment, so we just running off a porch light. So flipped on the porch light and let the dogs out, and they started running toward it looked like to be a puppy. So I called them back, and they came back. I walked over to the puppy that was beside the porch, the front porch, and we came out the side door, which we have a side porch. That's where I let the dogs out. So I walked over and looked at the puppy, and I rubbed it, and it was shaking. It was scared, and I guess you would be scared too. 2 giant pit bulls ran up on you, about half the size of you. I picked the puppy up, and I took it to my shop, which is very well lit, and I put it down in my shop, and I watched it walk away, and it walked away into the darkest corner of my shop. So I went to go get my wife, and I told her to come out here, and I found the puppy. So she comes out here, and I said, I think it's got mange, because the hair on it didn't look right. So when I got to the shop, I put on my welding gloves, and I went over there and rubbing it and looking at it, and she finally came in. She walked over and she said, Alan, I don't think that's a dog. And I asked her, I said, why do you think it's not a dog? And she said, it's just so odd looking. So we started looking at it, and it did look very odd. The hind quarters were way too short to be a puppy. The hind quarters were about probably 8 to 9 inches up off the ground, about to the height of its hind quarters. And then the chest was like extremely tall. I mean, it was on all fours, but its back stood probably about a good 15 inches tall. So it was very odd looking. The head was about the size of my pit bull's head, and they're females, so their heads are a lot smaller than the males, so they're about half the size of the male pit bulls. And the ears, they were kind of rounded over, but they were kind of like spiked, if that makes any sense. And I also had stripes running up the back vertically. If it was to stand up on 2 feet, the stripes would run up its back vertically. And it was a lighter color than what it was. This puppy was black, and it had a dark gray and light gray stripes on its back, and it did have yellow eyes. And I didn't notice the teeth until it bit me, but before it bit me, I had taken my welding gloves off, and I had picked the puppy up, and I started looking at it and everything, and rubbing it, and I don't know what scared it, but it bit my left forearm, and it drew blood. All I can remember is the inside of its mouth being like a T-Rex teeth. I mean, it didn't have normal dog teeth. I mean, every tooth in that dog's head was pointed and sharp and serrated, and it didn't look like dog's teeth because when it was biting, it pulled its lips back, I guess to get more of a bite. And then my wife, she tried to pry the dog's mouth off of my arm, and we did eventually get it. And I walked to the door, and it was snapping at my face and everything it could snap at. And I threw it on the ground, and it ran into the darkness. And I guess it ran across the road because that's what it was closest to when I picked it up. And that's the strangest thing that ever happened to us on our property the first time.
Oh, I'm sure it was the strangest thing. When you were looking inside its mouth, did you notice anything else strange?
The snout was kind of long, but it wasn't long enough for it to be like an adult dog's mouth, but it was narrow. It's like narrowed down to not like a point, but it had like a triangular style nose on it, snout. I mean, that was the only thing that I saw that was a little different, because I've been around pit bulls and collies all my life, so as far as it having a tapered nose, that was kind of strange for it to have a tapered nose and to be a puppy.
Yeah, you don't normally see that in a pup, that's true. Did you notice what color its skin was?
Underneath the fur, it looked like it was black. One of the reasons why I brought it to the shop was because I thought it was hurt. Because when I picked it up, it looked like it had two broke hands. The front paws were broke. So that's why I took it to my shop, because I didn't know if somebody had abused the dog, or we have bear traps around that the hunters put out to trap coyotes and stuff like that. And I just thought it may have got caught in one of the traps and broke its paws. But going back to that, his paws didn't look like paws, but it didn't look like hands either. I mean, it looked like somebody just stomped on the dog's front paws and like elongated them. And it had claws at the very tips of it, looked like cat claws that looked like they could be retracted. But other than that, I mean, as far as the color of the skin, I mean, it looked just like, even the pads at the bottom of the paws looked just like a normal dog's paw, like how the bottom of their feet look. It's that black, gritty skin looking. That's exactly what their hands looked like. And it was jet black. Their skin was jet black. And it had hair all over its body.
That'd be something to see. When you say its paws didn't look like hands, I take it you didn't see thumbs on it?
I really don't remember seeing thumbs. It didn't look like a raccoon's paw like what I've heard everybody else call it. But, I mean, it could have had it, but I didn't really pay attention to if it had thumbs.
Oh, that's all right. You're probably too busy trying not to get bit again.
Yes, sir, it was. Those teeth, they were like steak knives biting into my arm.
Oh, I'm sure they were. Wow, that's something. Did you notice any strange smells coming off of it?
It kind of had the puppy breath smell, but it also smelled like wet dog and pee.
I see. Do you think you ever saw that pup again after the day where it bit you?
I don't think I have, but the second encounter, I think it might have came back, because one of the dog men looked like it was all black.
Well, I guess that's possible. How much time had passed between the night where you picked up that pup and it bit you and the second experience that we're going to talk about in just a bit here?
I want to say it was probably about 3 to 4 years after that.
Well, that's plenty of time, yeah. Might have been that pup. You heard an episode of the show that reminded you of your situation. Which episode was it, and why did it remind you of an experience you had?
I don't remember what show it was, but I do remember the name of it being called Stripes. And the reason why it reminded me of it, and one of the reasons why I called you, was because of that encounter that I heard on your show. And because of the guy that was telling the story, he explained that dog, that pup, down to a T. It was just like the one that he talked about in his encounter.
Yeah, that was Josh Turner. A Dogman Called Stripes was the name of the episode. Yeah, Josh is always a popular guest coming on and sharing stories, so I'm not surprised that episode stands out in your mind that way, especially considering how, like you said, you found a pup just like what he was talking about. Before you tell us about your second experience, please tell us about the area where you live.
Well, we live in a very rural area, and there's probably about, I want to say about 6,000 acres around us that is farm land that is just pure for cattle. So our nearest neighbors are the actual cows that are in the field. So looking from the street, the front porch is probably about 30 foot to the center of the road. We actually live on 2 acres almost, and it's all cleared. In the back of the house, if you look off to your right, it's cleared, open pasture with a wood line back there about maybe 200 yards off to the right-hand side. If you look straight to the back, the wood line from the back of our house is probably about 75 to 100 yards from our house. And off to the left side, we have open pastures. I want to say probably about 20 acres of pasture land off to the left-hand side. And then over there, there's a subdivision. Not really a subdivision, but there's a family over there that bought a bunch of land, and some of their kids have built houses and stuff out there. And across the street, it is thick woods with briars and streams, and you can walk across the street of my house and you can go on a really nice nature walk.
Well, it sounds like a perfect environment for dogmen to me. You've got moving water for them to drink. You've got plenty of woods for cover. You've got a readily available supply of food for them and the cattle or the calves. So what more could they ask for?
Not much. It's got all that free food sitting right there.
Yeah, sounds like it to me. All right, Alan, please tell us about your second experience. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, it was one Sunday morning. It was back in 2013. It was spring. I was getting up from a late night, Saturday night. I was working late over at a friend's house, so I slept in late. So, when I mean late for me, late is 8 o'clock. So I'm an early riser, so I'm always up around 5 o'clock. And so 8 o'clock is a good sleep in for me. So I woke up and everybody else in the house was asleep. Well, except for my wife. She was up just in the bathroom or whatever she was doing. But I walked to the laundry room and I looked out of the window of the laundry room and I saw all of our chickens and ducks just scattered about the property back there. And I happened to look behind the shop and I saw a pack of coyotes. And then off to the far right of where the coyotes were, I saw 2 great big dog-like creatures. One was gunmetal gray. The other one was gunmetal gray, and the hindquarters faded from a dark gray into light gray to white, and then it had red streaking in the back of its tail, and it kind of came off looking almost like a fox's tail. The colors faded into it. It wasn't just one solid color all the way through. The colors just faded into the tip of the tail. So I looked outside and I saw those coyotes, and I was like, well, I'm going to put an end to this. So I went and grabbed my 30-30, walked around to the edge of the shop, and it's a lever action 30-30. So it only had 5 shots in it. So I took aim. I was probably about 25 to 30 yards from the coyotes, and I started shooting. So I shot 3 coyotes, and I left them laying there. Everybody else ran. I didn't want to shoot my last 2 bullets because those other 2 great big looking dogs were looking straight at me while I was shooting the other 3 coyotes that were running off. So I left 2 bullets because I didn't know if I was going to have to use them. I also knew at the same time that these dogs or coyotes were big enough to where that 30-30 wouldn't do any damage to it. I've hunted bears before, or I'm sorry, I have not hunted bears before. I have been on hunts where other people have hunted bears before. So I knew that the round that I had in my gun wasn't big enough, and these dogs were huge. We have cattle fence around our property, and we have what they call a T-post that are drove into the ground and they wrap barbed wire around it. Well, this barbed wire T-post is about my chest level, and I'm 6'2", and the backs of these, I'm gonna call them dogmen, the back of these dogmen were to the top of these T-posts, and they were standing right next to the barbed wire fence. So it wasn't like I was standing on the hill and looking down. We have extremely hilly property. We actually live on the very highest part of the county that we live at in that area. So we actually live on the hill and everything else just kind of fades down. But the level that I was standing at beside the shop, they were every bit of 5 foot tall to the top of their back. They backed up slowly to the wood line that was probably about 50 yards from those T-posts to the tree line. And they started backing up slowly, and you heard some growling. I heard some growling, but it didn't really come off as very scary at that point. I guess the adrenaline was pumping, but they started backing up very slowly. And, I guess they saw that I shot 3 of those coyotes, so I guess they thought I meant business. So they walked up into the tree line. As soon as they got into the tree line, it was like they disappeared. It wasn't even about 5 to 6 seconds after they had been into the tree line that I heard the soul-wrenching, god-awful howl, bark, and screech. And at that time, I got cold chills that ran from my feet all the way up to the top of my head. And I started backing up slowly. The point of the shop that I was at was about 20 foot from one side of the shop to the other. So I started backing up slowly. And when I got to the point that I couldn't see the tree line no more, I took off running to the house. I ran into the house. I told my wife what just happened, and she was looking out the window trying to figure out what was going on. But I went inside the house and I sat down, kind of calmed down. At that time, I was still shooken up and I was shaking. So I told her what had happened, and we had a birthday party to get to. So I told her that I just shot 3 coyotes and left them laying there. I said, I think I'm just going to leave them there because I don't want to go back out there. So, and we always took our dogs with us everywhere that we went. So she had already gotten the kids ready by the time all this had already taken place. And I was already halfway dressed when all this happened. So yeah, I went out in my boxers and my shirt, barefooted. So all I had to do is come in, put my pants on and leave. But we had a birthday party to go to. So we went, got everybody in the car, and we took off. And we actually didn't come back until the next day. The next day that we got back, I went out there into the field where I shot those coyotes. You saw the blood stain in the grass because there's tall grass out there, and they just got done mowing it to pick up hay. What they do out there is they mow the grass. They let this Bermuda grass grow tall, and they go out there with the tractors and they'll cut it, and the grass will be laying all over the place. And when I say there was blood stain, you could see where the coyotes laid, and there was blood everywhere. So you could see it on the dead grass where the blood was dried, and it was like they were picked up and taken away. You didn't see any drag marks. You didn't see anything. And I thought that was extremely strange, and that was the end of that encounter.
When you told your wife what had happened, did you tell her about the dogmen you saw?
I told her about them, and she was the one that told me that the local Boy Scout troop is going to have like a Jake's Day. They do that for turkey season coming in. And what they do is they bring like wild animals out there, and they teach kids what they can shoot and what they cannot shoot. So they have predatory animals out there, and they also bring deer and everything that you can actually shoot. So you can actually look at what you're supposed to shoot, and you can actually identify it. So there's no misidentification of what you're shooting or whatnot. But she told me that they're going to have hybrid wolves out there because Nash County actually has hybrid wolves out there. And I just kind of looked at her and I said, I don't know if this was a wolf, but I told her about that, and she said, it's probably what it was. And I was kind of, second guessing her, and I said, okay. So the next day, not the next day, I cannot remember how long a period it was before we went to that Jake's Day, but she said they were going to have the hybrid wolves out there along with some timber wolves and Black Panther and all that stuff out there, but I don't remember the timeline for that actually happening. But I do remember going to it when it happened, And I talked to the wildlife officer there, and I told him about what I saw. And he said, you had to have seen one of these hybrid wolves. I was like, no, sir. I said, that hybrid wolf that he showed me, those coyote wolf dog things that I saw that was standing about 5 foot tall, those things would dwarf that hybrid wolf that they were talking about. And those things were every bit of 400 pounds.
Yeah, those weren't any hybrid wolves or timber wolves or anything else that we know of. How far were the coyotes from those two dogmen that morning?
I want to say they were probably about maybe 20 feet from them. They were pretty close. They were eating on the chickens and the ducks, because why I left them there was because I figured I would have to go out there and clean up the mess from the massacre. So I just left them there. That's one of the reasons why I left those 3 coyotes there laying on the ground. I figured I have to bury all of it anyways.
Have you seen or heard anything strange after the day when you shot those coyotes?
Well, there's something that always goes on, and it always happens when the moon is phasing from the first start of the cycle until the moon actually is done. You can actually go out in the backyard and sit on my side porch, and in the left side of the pasture, you can actually see dark figures running in the pasture back there. And I've always thought that that was extremely strange. And when they run, it sounds like a herd running. I've seen cows run, and cows do not run as fast as these things run. And you can make out the black silhouette of what it is, and these things are huge. And they're in between the 3-story house that is down there off to the left. In between that house and my house is where they run.
Well, that's pretty unnerving.
Yes, sir, it is. And I've even taken my gun out there a few times and wanted to shoot at it, but also being at the same time, there's a bunch of houses over there, and I don't want to end up missing and actually hitting somebody because I don't have a night scope or anything like that.
Yeah, probably a good idea not to take a shot and risk doing that. Did you notice any interaction between the coyotes and the dogmen that morning?
They seem to not really be bothered by either one of their presence. And it was almost like the actual dogmen were actually packing with the coyotes.
Well, that wouldn't be unprecedented. They do that all the time, it would appear.
I actually have a coyote den not 300 yards from our house that's in front of it.
Yeah, you must have quite a few of them around then. What were the lighting conditions like when you saw those dogmen that morning?
It was 8 o'clock in the morning, so, I mean, we had right good lighting back there. It was just like you walk out in the morning and the sun's already up. The lighting conditions were great.
I see. You told me in the pre that you had problems with losing livestock for some time before you saw those two dogmen. Did your problems with losing livestock end after you shot those coyotes that morning?
Well, it did, because they had killed everything that we actually had. They killed out the population of the chickens and the ducks that we had. But also then, our cats started disappearing, one after the other after the other.
Yeah, for some reason they are pretty hard on cats, although they are dog men, so I guess that shouldn't be that big of a surprise. How many people have you shared the details of your experiences with?
I have told 3 people. I told my wife, my mom, and you.
How'd your mom respond when you told her about all this?
She kind of laughed at me and she said, I told you they were real.
Yeah, well, considering her background, I guess this is old hat for her, so I'm not surprised that she responded that way.
Yeah, she had a smile across her face, grinning ear to ear when I told her about it.
Oh, I bet she did. After all those years where you probably threw it back on her face when she was trying to tell you about werewolves and everything.
Yes, sir, I did. And she's like, well, you always need to listen to the elders because they have seen things that most kids haven't seen or don't want to see.
Yeah, I'd say. Is there a pattern to when strange things happen around your property, like a time of year, for example?
No, sir. Things just seem to worsen around fall and winter, but strange things happen around our property all the time.
Do you know of any Sasquatch sightings that have been reported in your area?
No, sir, I have not. I don't know of any.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they're around too. Not to say that what you're hearing back there is definitely Sasquatch, but from the way you describe it, it does make me wonder if that might not be what's causing those sounds when you hear the heavy footsteps. Dogmen, they can make a lot of noise when they move too, so that's not to rule out the possibility that you're hearing them.
My mom also used to tell me that there was a such thing as a Sasquatch, and that's how she used to get us in the house that night. She always would tell us that the Sasquatch is going to get us. That was one of her running jokes, when we were growing up, and that's how she always got us in the house. The Sasquatch is going to get you. She says that she's seen them, and from what I've seen about the werewolf, the Dogman, I believe her now. So if she says that there's a such thing as a Sasquatch, I believe her.
Yeah, that'd be a great way of getting the kids in the house. I can't blame her for using that tactic. Now that you know dogmen are in your area, have you taken any special measures to protect your kids?
Well, I always make sure that they don't ever go out at night. I also make sure that my wife and I are always outside with them. And their play area is 15 feet from the door. We made it to where if something does happen, we can go out there and get the kids pretty quickly and get them in the house as fast as we can. And I always have my pistol on me, which with what I've heard from your shows, shooting them really doesn't work too well.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to, at least. One of your kids has been having problems with nightmares. Do his nightmares seem to be centered around the dogman you saw that day?
Well, he says that there's tapping going on his window. And he's scared to look out of his window. So coming across, just like what I said about my mom, I said that I didn't believe her when she used to tell me things like that. But my mom always did tell me to always listen to your kids, because even if it doesn't sound right, you need to always listen to them, because what they're seeing, you may not be able to comprehend it, but you need to be able to listen and try to soothe them so that they're not so scared of what is going on around them, because she always says that there's things out there that nobody can explain why they exist. And you need to keep an open mind with raising kids to listen to everything that they say. And these dreams that he's having are coming off of the tappings and stuff like that on his window.
Poor kid, sounds like he's being terrorized.
Yes, sir, and all three of my boys actually share a bedroom together, so there's a set of bunk beds and a twin bed in there for them. So they actually sleep in a bedroom, and they actually have a playroom, so they actually don't have toys in their room. So they actually sleep where their beds are and do their homework and all that stuff in there. So that's actually their resting quarters, I guess, to say. So he says when he's laying there in the bed, he'll wake up at night and he would hear things tapping at the window and stuff. And I'd always just say, oh, it's just probably the cat picking at the screen or whatnot. And he says, Daddy, I don't know if that's what that is. He said, because if it was a cat, you would hear the claws. He says, I don't hear that. It's like you walk over to the window and you take your finger and you beat it against the glass. He said, that's what it sounds like.
I wish it wasn't so common, but if you've listened to any episodes of the show, I'm sure you realize that that sort of thing happens all the time.
Yes, it does. And my wife said, well, it's probably just a branch hitting the side of the house or the window. We don't have any landscaping around any corners of our house because our house is currently under construction. They're remodeling. So the landscape outside, there's no shrubs, no bushes, and no trees beside it. So that puts that out the window as far as something hitting against the side of the house.
Have you warned your son against looking out to see what's tapping on his window?
Yes, I have told him, if you hear it again, make sure that you get out of bed and you come get me. So I told him I wanted to listen to it. And I told him, if you do hear it, make sure you don't look out the window. Because you may see something scary, you may not. Because sometimes you can look out the window and see your own reflection and it's scary. And I told him, I said, being a big boy, you have to overcome your fear of sleeping alone in your room. And my middle child is now starting to wet the bed now. And he's starting to hear it. And he told me about this last week. and he has actually started wetting the bed because he's scared to get out of the bed now.
Wow, that's not good. Have you heard of anyone else in your area who might have had a Dogman encounter?
No, sir, I have not. And I've honestly hadn't actually put myself out there to say, hey, have you guys seen a werewolf or anything like that running around our neighborhood? But as far as I know, I hadn't heard anything.
Have you ever noticed the ambient sounds around your property stopping all of a sudden?
Yes, I have actually. We have a tire swing out there in the playground area for my kids. There's a tree out there. I made a tire swing for them out of an 18-wheeler tire, so I can actually go out there and sit in that thing like a hammock. And I usually do that. And I go out there and sit at night and watch the stars. And across the street, it's dead silent on our side. I mean, you can hear every noisy cricket that there is, and just about hear a pin drop on the other side of the road sometimes.
Well, that's awfully creepy. Have you ever seen anything strange in that area?
No, like I said, I've only heard things running through the woods over there, and I've heard coyotes. That's where the coyotes' den is. But as far as that, no, sir.
Your neighbor has a huge cattle farm. Do you know if she's had any problems with losing cattle?
Yes, sir. She's lost right many cattle. They get out onto the road somehow, and they're always seems to get hit by cars. But the funny thing of it is, these are calves and grown cows, and they're black Angus cows, so they're not no joke if you're going to hit a cow. I mean, a deer is not no joke when you hit a deer, but she said that she's lost so many cows to people hitting them, and you don't ever see any impact signs like glass laying all over the road or the car there. You always see the cow laying on either the side of the road or in the middle of the road. And I've always thought that was extremely strange because even when you hit a deer, you still get the impact of the actual collision. And every time that she has lost cattle, it's been within 45 to 50 yards from our property.
Have you ever had the chance to check the cow carcasses to see if any of them had been fed upon by large predators?
Some of the small calves look like they had been like ripped apart, like they've been torn in half, but sometimes you'll come across them as being mutilated, but that's pretty much it.
Wow, that's awfully strange. It does make you wonder. I found out that red wolves actually do live in North Carolina. Have you seen any of them coming around?
No, sir. We actually live in the part of the state that actually don't have the red wolf population. We're too far west. We live about almost 200 miles from the actual closest red wolf population. The red wolf population is pretty much on the outer banks of North Carolina, and they actually have a refuge out there for them.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that really surprised me when I found out that you actually do have any kind of wolf around there. I just didn't expect that. Besides the cats you mentioned losing, is there a problem with missing pets in your area?
Yeah, our neighbors always come around and ask if we have actually seen their animals, and we've done the same with ours. We go around to our neighbor's house and say, hey, have you seen one of our cats? The neighbors do exactly the same thing. They'll go around and ask questions, but there's a woman that lives not too far from us, about 3/4 of a mile from us, and she's pretty much known as the cat lady, and there's cats missing out there all the time. She's always coming up on the weekends and saying, you guys see this cat out? We don't ever see them, and at one point we didn't know she had that many cats, but you open her door and there's probably 30, 40 of them in there with her.
Wow, that's a lot of cats.
Yes, sir. She's got right many walking outside too, so.
Yeah, that is a lot of cats. Since you obviously have such a healthy coyote population in your area, it's probably them that's been taking such a toll on the pets, but I guess there is a remote possibility it is something more exotic like a dogman or dogmen that are taking them out. I guess we'll never know, but the easiest answer is normally the correct answer. If I had to bet money, I bet you it's probably the coyotes that are taking them out.
Yeah, it's probably the coyotes taking most of the small animals. Our population of deer out there is ridiculous. I mean, I hit a deer at least once or twice a year. out here by us. I mean, the deer population is just huge. So if it was a dog man, I'd probably be easier to spend most of your time running after a deer than it would be a small cat.
Yeah, there's a lot more meat with one kill, that's for sure. You have a Native American tribe that lives about 15 miles from your property. Do you know the significance of that, considering you seem to have dogmen in your area?
I do know that there's a ancient burial ground somewhere around us, but as far as like having the burial mounds and all that stuff, I hadn't ever seen them, but I've heard that they are around, and I do know that the property that we live on used to be a Native American tribe that lived in the area that we actually live on.
On the land that you live on?
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's interesting.
So you can walk out in the backyard and you can take a small shovel and go to like do some gardening or build a flower bed and whatnot, and you can find arrowheads, you can find the Indian marbles, you can find tomahawk heads, you can find all that just by digging in the dirt.
Yeah, that might explain some of the activity you're having. We don't know for sure that there is something to that idea that Native American burial grounds and things like that tend to draw dogmen in, but seems like there might be something to that.
It might be.
Yeah, there just might. You saw a werewolf in a movie that bears resemblance to one of the creatures you saw by the fence that morning. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, the werewolf in Van Helsing, the one that was standing up on the post in the beginning of the movie, if you actually look at the hindquarters on that werewolf, the dogman that I saw that had the color change on the hindquarters, it kind of looked just like that werewolf's hindquarters. It just had some red streaking in it. That's the first thing that I thought of after I went in the house and sat down. I said, that thing looked just like that werewolf in Van Helsing.
Did shoulders and head look different?
Yeah, because the one in the movie actually looked like a husky. So it was white and gray, and this one was gunmetal gray from its snout almost all the way back to like where his hindquarters would be. And then not his hindquarters, but about where his abs would end to where it would go to the tip of his tail. It was all different colors from there. Yeah, I was more or less talking about the color variances about that one. But it looked pretty much the same as the other one that was out there in the field crawling around on all 4 feet.
Well, seeing anything around your property that has any body parts that resemble a werewolf's body parts, that's not good.
Yes, sir. I hope I don't ever have a chance to see it again.
Well, I hope you don't see any again, too. Well, Alan, it's about time for us to get out of here. Before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Well, just because somebody says that they've seen something, don't be so quick to shoot them down, because in my experience, they may know what they're talking about, and have an open mind. Make sure that you go out in well-lit areas, and make sure that if you were to go out, that you stay close to a well-lit area. And if you're going outside at night to tinker in the shop, make sure that you come in right after you get done doing what you're doing in your shop. And make sure that your kids aren't out playing past dark. And I think that everything would pretty much stay safe that way.
Well, that sounds like good advice to me. Alan, thank you so much for your time coming on the show and telling us about your experiences like that. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Vic. It's been an awesome, great time talking to you.
Oh, it's been great talking with you too. You know, I wish you and your family the best. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.